All right, if you have the Catholic Catechism, go ahead and open it. If you need one, there's one back here in the sound booth. There's probably one somewhere else. Got a couple up here. Catholic Catechism. All right. The only problem with doing this, we're definitely not teaching the catechism the way if you went to a catechism class typically, because they would basically give you a section and kind of just, have you look at a couple of the major paragraphs and summarize content. We're literally just going through it word by word, word by word. So when we're done, you're going to hopefully have a better understanding. What are you looking for? Oh, right there? Yeah. Yeah, if it was a snake, it would have bit. Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, that is a Texasism. Okay. So by the time we're done, you should have a far deeper understanding of the content than you would if you went to a typical catechism class. However, because of the way we're teaching it, sometimes it makes it hard. Like when we jump back in, like, okay, what do we review? What do we not review? So let's at least just. I'm not going to. We finished the prologue. Obviously, we're well into the next section. Go to the table of contents just quickly, where you can at least kind of see the big picture here. Table of contents. Say amen when you're there. All right, and remember, we're studying the Catholic Catechism for lots of reasons. A whole lot of people in the world identify as Catholic. If you study church history, Catholicism hits you, in the face over and over and over, and it gives us an opportunity not only to learn what they actually believe. It gives us challenges us not to learn theology, but do theology, and it's going to confront us with lots of church history. So there's lots of benefits in doing this. You can tell the first section was the prologue. We went through all of that, and then we've started the profession of faith. What is section 1 of? Part 1 is the profession of faith. Remember how the catechism is broken down? Part 1 is the profession of faith. Part 2 is the celebration of the Christian mystery. Part 3 is life in Christ, and part 4 is Christian prayer. Okay, everybody remember those 4 major parts? That's kind of how it's structured. All right, under part 1, the first section under part 1 is called I Believe, We Believe, and chapter 1 dealt with what? Man's capacity for God. Now, I cannot go back in and review all of that. But we've definitely looked at it, all right? Now, let's see. Did anybody mark down where we stopped? Yes, we were into chapter 1, man's capacity for God. Yeah, definitely. Just don't know which paragraph we stopped. Let's go back. Let's see here. Okay, we'll go back. So let's go to page 14, paragraph 31. And this part is called Ways of Coming to Know God. Everybody see that? Yes, and we definitely talked about this, but I think it was at the end. So we'll kind of jump back in and see where we can go. All right, and I know it makes it hard to go back. To try to go back to each paragraph and review it. But all the lectures are online, so it's kind of up to you to make sure you're caught up, because I'm just no way. See how big this book is? If I go back and do 15, at some point my review would be longer than the lesson, right? So just keep that in mind. All right. So here we go. Ways of coming to God. Paragraph 31. Created in God's image and called to know and love Him, the person who seeks God discovers certain ways of coming to know Him. Now stop right there. Make sure we remember, at least from our theological perspective, and I think at one time Catholicism would have agreed, but they became basically semi-Pelagian. We believe, make very clear, before someone is saved, no one seeks God. No one seeks God. And we take that idea from where? Book of Romans. Yes, Book of Romans. Everybody remember that? No one seeketh God? No, not one. All right. We won't have to go look up that passage, but you get the idea. So, so when they say that, we have to at least go, wait a minute, what are they referring to? Let me read it again. Created in God's image. We agreed that we're all created in God's image, yes? Called to know and love Him, okay? Yes, people are generally called to know and love God. However, the person who seeks God discovers certain ways of coming to know Him. Now, this makes it very difficult because are they referring to the fact, are they referring to the lost person out there who, this lost person just decides to start seeking God and then all of a sudden realizes there's ways of coming to know Him? We would argue with a completely different soteriology, correct? We would say the person is not seeking God. God does what? God seeks him. God brings him to saving knowledge. It's not like the person is seeking God and then realizes there's all these ways to come to know Him. So it's setting up a very different soteriology and a very different perspective on how we believe depravity greatly impacts. Again, this is very semi-Pelagian from the surface, right? So created in God's image and called to know Him, to know and love Him, the person who seeks God discovers certain ways of coming to know Him. These are also called proofs for the existence of God, not in the sense of proofs in the natural sciences, but rather in the sense of converging and convincing arguments, which allows us to attain certainty about the truth. These ways of approaching God from creation have a twofold point of departure: the physical world and the human person. Now let's stop right here. All right. Now, this idea of us seeking, I'm not a fan of that. However, we do believe that God, now we would state it in a different way, that God has revealed Himself in certain ways. Yes? And that in these certain ways, someone should be able to know that there is a God. Doesn't bring them to salvation, but at least know there is a God. Correct? Okay. Now, and let's see, they say these ways of approaching God from creation have a twofold point of departure: the physical world and the human person. Let's start with the world. Starting from movement, becoming a contingency, and the world's order and beauty, one can come to a knowledge of God as the origin and the end of the universe. All right? So starting with the physical world, a person should be able to come to know that there is a God. What else do they claim you can know? As the origin and end of the universe. Now, I don't know if I would go I don't know if we would want to go that far. We would at least say that you can come to know that there is a God. Yes? And we take our ideas from where? What two major passages of Scripture do we look at to kind of prove this point? Romans 1. Another very important passage. Old Testament. Psalm 19. Remember, Psalm 19 speaks of God's general revelation and creation. Just open up Psalm 19 real quick. We sing the second part of Psalm 19, correct? Let's go to Psalm 19. You know, verses 1 through 6 speaks of it's called God's general revelation and creation. And look at how Psalm 19 verses 1 through 6 reads: "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth His handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard." There is nowhere you can go where their voice is not heard. And the voice of what? Of creation. The voice of creation. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them hath He set a tabernacle for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and rejoiced as a strong man to run a race. His going forth is from the end of the heaven, and his circuit unto the ends of it, and there is nothing hid from the heat thereof. Bottom line, the creation declares there is God. And then, starting at verse 7, it goes from God's general revelation, and what do we call verse 7 and following? God's general revelation in verses 1 through 6. 7 and following is God's special revelation. And special revelation contained where? In Scripture. In Scripture. All right? General revelation, special revelation. That's where we get the idea. They're not offering any scriptures yet, but they're going with this same idea. How does God reveal himself? Through the physical world, through creation. Right? Everybody understand that? Pretty straightforward. All right? This is what they then have they have these two quotes here. And St. Paul says of the Gentiles, for what can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them. Ever since the creation of the world, his invisible nature, namely his eternal power and deity, has been clearly perceived in the things that have been made. And that is Romans chapter 1, verses 19 and 20. Everybody see that? All right. Romans chapter 1, 19. We agree with this, do we not? Well, the only problem we have is I don't believe there's just some person sitting there like, I'm going to seek God today. Oh, look, these are the ways I can get to know God. We don't believe that happens because we believe people are dead in their trespasses and sins. There's the major difference here. Okay. All right. And then they go from St. Paul, and who's the next person they quote? St. Augustine issues this challenge. Question the beauty of the earth. Question the beauty of the sea. Question the beauty of the air distending and diffusing itself. Question the beauty of the sky. Question all these realities. All respond, see, we are beautiful. Their beauty is a profession. These beauties are subject to change. Who made them, if not the beautiful one, who is not subject to change? Everybody see that? Right? That comes from a sermon from St. Augustine. All right? Now, what does he say? If a person will look at nature and ask questions, the answer to those questions are, if things are beautiful, then there has to be an ultimate standard of beauty to create beauty. If these things change, there has to be an unchangeable one. That's kind of the concept, right? Ask questions, and it will lead you to God. Now, I agree, if you ask questions, it should lead you to God. However, no matter how all the evidence there screaming there is a God, it can't lead a dead person to God. It screams there is a God. They are without excuse. But trust me, you can present all the evidence and they will do what? Well, whatever. Who cares? Like, you can't make someone care. You can't make someone care about God. There is a God. You can't do that. God has to create that. So that's where we would differ here at this point. All right, let's continue. And that brings us to what paragraph? 33. So what's these ways of approaching God from creation have a twofold point of departure. What's the first one? The physical world. We've looked at that. And what's the second one? The human person. With his openness to truth and beauty, his sense of moral goodness, his freedom and the voice of his conscience, with his longings for the infinite and for happiness, man questions himself about God's existence. And all this he discerns signs of his spiritual soul. The soul, the seed of eternity, we bear in ourselves, irreducible to the merely material, can have its origin only in God. All right? Now, wow. There's a lot we could say here, okay? There's a lot we could say here. What jumps out at you about paragraph 33? Yeah, it definitely does not. Very Pelagian, does it not? That does not sound like a dead man, dead in our trespasses and sins. Now, yes, we know they believe in the doctrine of original sin, but this sounds like original sin doesn't have too much of a profound impact on you, right? I mean, listen to the way it describes the human person. Openness to truth. Are human beings open to truth? I don't know. They're open to truth they like. They're not open to truth they don't like. In fact, there's a natural resistance to it. We would argue when it comes to the truth of God, are people open to it? No. No, they hate the truth. They despise the truth. I think we can agree there. Open to beauty. His sense of moral goodness. I don't know exactly what you mean by that. This is where you kind of need clarification. A sense of morality, I agree. Everyone has a sense of morality. It's all messed up, but trust me. You take people who even reject God and they'll start whining and complaining about what's fair and what's right. And you're like, how are you complaining about what's fair and what's right? Because you need an ultimate standard of fair and right to argue for fair and right. So, all right, maybe that's what they're referring to there. What else do they say? What's the next two words? His freedom. All right. Big popular belief in the Roman Catholic Church. Freedom of the will. All right. They love that doctrine. They love that doctrine. They love the freedom of the will. So you'll have lots of people who hate Catholicism, but they are very in line with Catholic teaching when it comes to this subject. We would argue the will is what? Well, this is the way we should state it. If you state it that it's dead, the typical Pelagian or semi-Pelagian will immediately just argue with you. We believe all people are sinners. And if all people are sinners, and we have a sinful nature, and logically that would have to impact what? The will. And if there is sin present, then can the will be totally free? No. To be totally free, you have to deny what? That we have a sinful nature. Exactly. If you believe in the freedom of the will, then you have to believe in the freedom from sin. And if you believe in that people are free from sin, then you have to do what Pelagius believed, that it's possible for someone to be perfect without even God's help. All right, and that leads you to all kinds of theological problems. That seems to kind of be what they're indicating here, but let's go back. What else do we have? His freedom, the voice of his conscience. Now, we've talked about conscience. I don't believe you can trust conscience. I believe conscience is misleading, and obviously the Bible even says conscience can be scarred. Yes? All right. With his longings for the infinite and for happiness, man questions himself about God's existence. I don't know if man questions himself about God's existence. I think there are some people who are haunted their entire life with big questions. Like they spend their whole life going, what about this and what about that? And what about eternity? And what about God? And what about right? And what about wrong? And what about truth? And what about lies? And then there are other people who they could care less about any question that has more than 3 letters. So I don't think that can describe man naturally, because I don't think most people are that way. But it's a very exalted view of man. Agreed? It's a very exalted view of man. I'm curious to see where they're going to go with it. Now, this next part is very interesting. Now, let's read this last part carefully. And all this, he discerns signs of his spiritual soul. The soul, the seed of eternity, we bear in ourselves, irreducible to the merely material, can have its origin only in God. This seems to argue that a person, right, because of all these exalted qualities, can just ask enough questions and ultimately discover, hey, there's a soul inside of me that the material can't explain. I completely don't buy this. I don't believe that a person can naturally do this. Agreed? I mean, our theology says it can't. And this, to me, the only way to get to this point is you have to end up with what? You have to end up with semi-Pelagian at best. Agreed? That's very poetic the way it says, but the seed of eternity we bear in ourselves, or the soul is the seed of eternity we bear in ourselves, irreducible to the merely material. I agree the soul cannot be reduced to the merely material, can have its origin only in God. I agree it can have its origin only in God. I just don't think that he can discern that. I don't think he can discern it. Paragraph 34. I feel like we could spend a couple of years on paragraph 33, but that's okay. Paragraph 34. The world and man attest that they contain within themselves neither their first principle nor their final end, but rather that they participate in being itself, which alone is without origin or end. Thus, in different ways, man can come to know that there exists a reality which is the first cause and final end of all things, a reality that everyone calls God. All right. Now that's from Thomas Aquinas. Okay, and we don't want to pull out any Thomas Aquinas. Trust me. No, man, Thomas Aquinas is one of the hardest. Man, you talk about something complicated. When I was Catholic University having to write papers on Thomas Aquinas, I almost gave up and said I can never understand this, and I still don't even know. I wrote a paper. I got a good grade, but I still don't know what I wrote because I didn't understand what I was writing. Okay, because I'm not joking. Thomas Aquinas. You don't believe me? Sit down and read Thomas Aquinas, and then call me and tell me how well you understand it. Okay, it's some complicated stuff. So, man, what do we do with that paragraph? Well, what's probably the key phrase in paragraph 34? Okay, contain within themselves. Okay. Well, here's probably the thing you want to underline. Thus, in different ways, man can come to know that there exists a reality which is the first cause and final end of all things, a reality that everyone calls God. So, in other words, he is arguing that there is a knowledge, there is an awareness and a knowledge contained within man that will bring them to understand that there is a God. Now, if I look to the Bible, and when Paul makes his argument in Romans, he doesn't necessarily say that man in and of themselves can come to know God. He points to something outside, but he does say that they can come and know right and wrong. I would say internally, we can come to know and understand that there is some idea of right and wrong because it's built into us because God's law is written on our heart. But to truly come to know there is a God, we have to look to outside of ourselves. Isn't that kind of where Paul seems to go? He doesn't seem to say that the law will help us know there's a God. He seems to say that the law on our heart will let us know that there is what? Wrong and right. Yes? You can have an atheist. I mean, if you've ever had an argument with an atheist, you talk to it, and before you argue with an atheist, if I know that a person's an atheist, sometimes I don't start with trying to argue with or about God. I don't even bring up that I believe in God. I'll just talk about normal things in life. Something in society, something in politics, something in the news. And then guess what I listen for? Moral declarations. That's wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. And then later when we come back and they try to pretend that they don't have, no. I don't believe that there's a morality. I've talked to you for the last 3 weeks, and you've condemned half of the population in some way, shape, or form. You've said that group is wrong, that group is wrong, that was wrong, that was wrong. That's a lot of wrong for someone who doesn't believe in morality, because deep down, you know there's a morality. Okay, that's different than this, coming to know God. That's just the idea that you know that there's right and wrong. It's an interesting paragraph, and obviously we don't have time to spend the 8 years we could spend on it. Okay, but how would we summarize 33 and 34? If you were to summarize these two paragraphs. The Catholic Church seems to believe that man There's a quality within man that allows them to know and understand that there is a God in and of themselves, and which seems to deny the teaching of total depravity. Agreed? All right. At least on the surface, that's what it looks like. Yes? All right. All right. Let's go to paragraph 35. Man, some of these paragraphs are going to be so hard. Oh, well, here we go. This may even get us closer. Man's faculties make him capable of coming to a knowledge of the existence of a personal God. Man, I don't... That's so semi-Pelagian. Doesn't that scream semi-Pelagian? What would we say? I can know a God exists, but that's about it. So I don't know if we're... This goes so far to say that because a man's faculties make him capable of coming to knowledge of the existence of a personal God. That seems to go beyond just knowing that there is a God. Do you agree? That seems to be going beyond that. But for man to be able to enter into real intimacy with him, God willed both to reveal himself to man and to give him the grace of being able to welcome this revelation in faith. Wow. Grace of being, that seems to argue that a man in and of themselves, right? A man in and of themselves can come to do what? Accept and believe in God's revelation. Now, for us who are more reformed, we reject this. Every Protestant you know accepts this. Because most Protestants you know believe that people are what? Capable of just accepting God and believing God on their own. And we're like, no, you've got to be regenerated. You've got to be brought to spiritual life. So, a very different perspective. Yes? Okay, man is able to come to a knowledge of the existence of God, but the key here, if man wants to be able to enter into real intimacy. Now, if you want the real intimacy, then God willed both to reveal himself to man and to give him the grace of being to welcome this revelation in faith. In other words, you're capable of knowing that there's a personal God. That seems to just be...
But wasn't Pelagian say that
yeah.
It goes out to everybody?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, basically, it's kind of what they're saying. I know it's said two different ways, but you're right. Basically, what they're saying is there's a natural way, and then God. So there's a natural way to know that there is a God, and God willed it for everyone that they can accept it. So everyone possesses the ability, not only to know God, but to possess the ability to have an intimate relationship with God. So they possess the ability to do both. But if they do, they would say he did it for everyone. Does that make sense? Yeah, man accepts because God gave you the ability to accept. Now, God may give the credit for giving you the ability, but everyone has the ability, and then this completely seems to go against the whole doctrine of total depravity. It's very Pelagian. Yeah. At least on the surface, would we agree? Now, we may have some Catholics going, absolutely not. Well, I mean, I'm saying the reading here, we'll see where it ends up, right? The proofs of God's existence, however, can predispose one to faith and help one to see that faith is not opposed to reason. All right? I agree that these proofs can help us understand that faith is not opposed to reason. I agree there. But the real issue here for us is they are claiming everyone possesses the ability in and of themselves to just understand God's revelation and accept God's revelation. And we would argue, clearly that is not the case. Clearly that is not the case. What needs to take place? Yeah. Now, this gets into the Ordo Salutis. right? Okay, the order of salvation, right? Ordo salutis. What comes first? Regeneration? Well, okay, yeah, you could go back to election, predestination. But remember we talked about, does faith come before regeneration, or does regeneration come before faith? Remember, this is a big debate within the Protestant world. Forget the Catholic world. Protestants can't agree on this. The average Christian believes, here's the person, here's Tim, right? I present the gospel to him, and they believe that Tim, in and of himself, has the ability to do what? Accept and believe. And then when he believes, he is regenerated. The other side believes, no, God has to regenerate so that he can believe and receive and repent and in that process, God grants the faith. Right? Two totally different perspectives, and well, we could go there. All right, does that kind of make sense? Yes. All right. Wow, there's a lot going on there. Okay. Let's go to the next part. What's the next part? The knowledge of God according to the church. Man, those were some heavy paragraphs right there, but I think we can at least reduce what they're saying. Let's see where they go with this. Our Holy Mother, the church, holds and teaches that God, the first principle and last end of all things, can be known with certainty from the created world by the natural light of human reason. Without this capacity, man would not be able to welcome God's revelation. Man has the capacity because he is created in the image of God. All right, we got a lot to work on here. We got a lot to work on this paragraph. Woo-hoo. All right, what's the first thing that jumps out at you in this paragraph? It should just like smack you in the face. All right, what is the church called? Our Holy Mother. All right, now, let's just start with a couple of thoughts here. Is the church in the Bible ever referred to as mother? Let me ask you this question. Is the church referred to as being described as a female? Yes, okay. As a bride. All right, so that part is good, but it's not described as mother. Would we agree? All right. The Bible never refers to the church as mother. Right. Right. But, so, yeah, definitely the church is a bride for Christ, but it's using a female terminology. Now, can you take this female imagery and then apply it to, not only is she a bride, she becomes a mother. Right? Taking that image. Now, let's just establish a couple of things. Nowhere in Bible is that used. Would everyone agree? Right? I cannot think of one. All right? Agreed? Right? So, that means we would be very cautious to ever use that term. But let's ask this question. Does the church, now I know the Protestant image of the church is very low. All right? The Protestant has a very, 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 very weak view of the church. That's why within the Protestant world, what is the Protestant world filled with? No? These things that don't operate under the control of a church. Parachurch ministries. Right? They operate outside of a church. Right? Here's this ministry. What church are you connected to? It's just a parachurch ministry, right? Because they believe, and these parachurch ministries spring up for a couple of reasons. Either A, they don't believe the church is doing its job, so then they go outside of the church to create something to do what they think the church should be doing. One of the most famous examples is in the 1990s, Promise Keepers. The people of Promise Keepers thought the church was not doing a good job doing what? Equipping and raising up godly men. So they went outside of the church. Now, it's always weird. They start outside of the church and then they need the church to bring the people to the parachurch. It's always weird. Like, you didn't do your job, but now you come to us. And it's like really weird. Okay, so parachurch organizations are a dime a dozen in the Protestant world. Okay, I mean, all over the place. Okay, that's problematic. Right? But and it demonstrates the Protestant world has a very low view of the church. The average Protestant views the church as kind of this optional thing. In the Catholic world, it's not optional. Right. Well, I mean, even a Protestant, if you treated your independent little church like it was important, that would at least be more in line with how Catholics view it than the way Catholics. I mean, the average Protestant just views church as what? Optional, right? It's kind of there, right? It doesn't have any power, doesn't really have any authority, and let's be honest, is it really necessary? Okay, I think a lot of Protestants, if you push comes to shove, I don't know if they even believe it's necessary. In fact, they believe they can start a home church. So obviously they don't believe it's necessary. Right? And they believe you can split it and do whatever you want to it. Catholics have a different image. They believe the church is the mother, and without the mother, you can't survive. The mother protects, the mother equips, the mother feeds. You need the mother. Now, that's a radically different approach. Now, again, if we take the New Testament, just think in your head, New Testament passages are New Testament concepts that should elevate the role of the church in the mind of a Protestant. Well, what would some verses you would use to talk about the importance of the church? Okay. Well, we can start with Ephesians. Christ died for the church, gave himself for the church, right? Gave his word, pastors and teachers, for the equipping of the saints in the church, right? So he gave himself for it. He equipped the church. Most of the entire New Testament is written to a church. He gives instructions on how the church should operate, right? He says pastors are supposed to have some kind of authority. I mean, the average Protestant needs to get back to it. Now, again, we may not want to go all the way to calling the church the mother, right? Because we don't believe we have a biblical mandate to do so. But we may want to learn that maybe the church is more important than the way Protestants handle it. All right? So let's go back to this. I just want to make sure that phrase, and just let's keep... Let's just be on the lookout for how many times that phrase shows up in the Catechism. All right? Let's just be on the lookout for it. All right. So our Holy Mother, the Church, holds and teaches that God, the first principle, and last end of all things, what's the next three words? Can be known with certainty from the created world by the natural light of human reason. I believe that the natural world can show us that there is a God, yes, but that's about all it can do. But let's see, as I go on here. Without this capacity, man would not be able to welcome God's revelation. Now, here's where we have a problem. When you say welcome God's revelation, what do you mean? Are you saying welcome God's revelation in a saving way? If you're saying in a saving way, then we have a problem, because we don't believe that anyone can look at nature and end up becoming saved based off that, because we believe God has to step in and do something. So I don't believe you have the capacity to welcome God's revelation. But where do they believe this ability comes from? Because we're created in the image of God. Now, do we agree that we're created in the image of God? However, what's one major thing that we believe happened? The fall. And we believe that fall marred and messed up the image. The image is there, there's elements to it, but that it's marred, and that any ability we naturally possessed, we don't possess that natural ability. Agreed? So they keep going with ability, capacity, and I don't know. All right, let's see where else they go with this. All right, paragraph 37. In the historical conditions in which he finds himself, however, man experiences many difficulties in coming to know God by the light of reason alone. All right, they say there's difficulties they face in coming to know God from reason alone. Listen, let me make this very clear. From our perspective, it is impossible to come to know God by reason alone. You can come to know that there is a God, but you can't come to know the true God by reason alone. Yes? I mean, at least that's going to be, until you can tell me why the Bible says we're dead in our trespasses and sins, either that means we're dead or it means we're not dead. Right? And if it means we're dead, and if you go, remember in Romans, no one seeketh after God. No one understands. No one understands. No one seeks God. And when we went in Romans, that what is impacted by the fall? The mind, mouth, eyes, heart is desperately wicked, deceitful above all things, the will. There's no way then we're just sitting there capable to come to know God by reason alone. I don't know why they keep stressing this, but okay. Let's see where they go with it. Here's this paragraph that they take from a... I think that, it's from one of the popes. I'm trying to think if that document is an encyclical. I think it's an encyclical. I could be wrong. I'd have to look. All right, let's see what they quote here. Though human reason is, strictly speaking, truly capable by its own natural power and light of attaining to a true and certain knowledge of the one personal God who watches over and controls the world by his providence, and of the natural law written in our hearts by the Creator, yet there are many obstacles which prevent reason from the effective and fruitful use of the inborn faculty. For the truths that concern the relations between God and man wholly transcend the visible order of things, and if they are translated into human action and influence it, they call for self-surrender and, how do you say that word? Abnegation, all right? Abnegation. The human mind, in its turn, is hampered in the attaining of such truths, not only by the impact of the senses and the imagination, but also by disordered appetites, which are the consequences of original sin. So it happens that men in such matters easily persuade themselves that what they would not like to be true is false or at least doubtful. All right. So let's summarize. They are saying this: you possess the natural ability, however, there's all these difficulties to you exercising said natural ability. That leaves open the chance that you can. Right. So they want to believe that original sin gives difficulties, but you're still able in your natural ability to overcome said difficulties. Now, you're only hampered by it. Now, I guess that Pope, he did not state what? He doesn't mention the fact that we're dead in our trespasses and sins. He doesn't mention any of the scriptures that describe our depravity. This is, you may want to just write all next to these paragraphs: Pelagius, semi-Pelagius, semi-Pelagian. I mean, this is just the influence of Pelagianism. I don't know how you can get around it. It's just bizarre that the church that in some ways historically condemned Pelagius is the church that basically becomes Pelagius or Pelagian in its doctrine. I mean, it's all over the place. From that Pope, I would have to look. Does it give the date for the letter? That could be 561. She's going to look up Pope Pius and know what years that he lived. Make sure you get the right Pius. There's a couple. 12th.
So Pius the 12th is 27.
Okay.
So he died in 1958.
Okay. So yeah, he died in 1958. So yeah, maybe. All right. So yeah, so that comes in the fifth. So well after obviously Pelagian and Augustine and all of them are gone. Yeah, in the modern thinking, and now it shows up in the 1994 Catechism. Yeah, I mean it's I hate that, like, hey guys, you all have the ability. Wait, original sin causes some problems, but you can overcome it. It's like, well then what does original sin actually do? It just hampers you. Well, Romans says that no one seeks, no one understands. No, you can't have it both ways. Because guess what everyone wants? This is where theology wants human freedom at all cost. It wants to protect human freedom. And when you want to protect human freedom at the expense of what the Bible clearly teaches, there is a problem. All right, let's go further here. What paragraph are we on? 38. This is why man stands in need of being enlightened by God's revelation, not only about those things that exceed his understanding, but also about those religious and moral truths which of themselves are not beyond the grasp of human reason. So that even in the present condition of the human race, they can be known by all men with ease, with firm certainty, and with no admixture of error. Now, did you just hear what they just said? Without any help, they can be what? Easily known. Right? And not only, they can be known by all men with ease, with firm certainty, and with no admixture of error. Well, then why is there so much error and why are there so many problems? And Sarah brings up a good question. Why even need the church? Why even need God? Right? Remember when we studied Pelagius, we came to the same question. Well, why even need God? Remember we looked at the 18 points of Pelagian thought? And we came to the conclusion, why do you even need God? Yeah, you don't. And I will argue that history proves that people obviously can't easily know these things. Clearly, a mixture of error is the most common thing that happens, and clearly we don't have any certainty.
Go back to the Catechism.
Okay.
This is why man stands in need of being enlightened by God's revelation.
Right, but then...
So God is the beginning.
Right.
So that we can know. They are stating that we do need God here.
They say that, but then they come around and almost argue that...
But it's because of God's revelation.
Yeah, it's because of God's revelation, yes. God revealed himself, and then we possess some ability to know it.
Even in our present messed up situation, we can still know.
Yeah, even our present messed up condition, we can still know. And for all men, please note, all men. That's not saved, that's everyone. Even the lost man. Everybody see that? Now, yeah, they would. I agree what Sarah's saying. They would try to attribute the reason this can happen because of God. They would try to give God the credit, but ultimately, God is the reason that gives you the ability, and there's just no way. There's just no way that that's the way it works. All right. A lot to work through there. How would we summarize everything up to this point? Let's make sure we at least have a good way to summarize before we go to this next section. Yeah. Or just we can state it this way. According to the Catechism, man, now it may be because of God, man possesses the ability to understand, know, and receive the revelation of God. They can know it, they can understand it, and they can receive it, and they can do it naturally. In other words, it doesn't take God regenerate, because what did they just say there? All men can. That's lost people. With ease. I don't believe this in any way, shape, or form. All right? What would be our doctrinal stance? That all people are created in the image of God. But whatever ability that was intended with that is somewhat greatly messed up because of our depravity. And so the state of every human being is born what? Spiritually dead to God. Nature may tell them there is a God, but it only will lead to what? Idolatry and false religion. Not going to get them to the true God. To get to the true God, not only are we dead, our hearts are desperately wicked and deceitful above all things. Our mind is messed up. We can't see. We can't understand. We don't seek. We are in completely, how would we say it? Helpless and hopeless state. God must intervene. And God must do what? Regenerate and grant faith. If God doesn't give faith, you cannot generate the faith in and of yourself. All right, now I know this leads to a whole discussion about election. Even if you hate election, look, if you hate election, you got to get rid of depravity. And if you get rid of depravity, then you're going back to Pelagius. And at that point, I don't know how you read the rest of the Bible. Or I don't know how you look at the world. Why is there so much confusion about God? When it can be what? Known by all men, with ease, with firm certainty, and with no admixture of error. I'm sorry. No. All right, next section. Oh, man. See. Oh, we may be able to do this. Let's go quick. All right, we're going to move fast. All right. In defending the ability of human reason to know God, the church is expressing her confidence in the possibility of speaking about him to all men and with all men, and therefore of dialogue with other religions and with philosophy and science, as well as with unbelievers and atheists. So they defend the ability, and the reason they defend the ability is they believe you can talk to that the Catholics can get together with the Muslims and have a dialogue. And why? Because the Muslims possess the ability to know. And they can have a dialogue with an atheist. And they have a dialogue with philosophy. Because everyone naturally has the ability to know God. Right, well, how's that worked out for you? Right? No, I don't believe they possess the natural ability. Next, paragraph 40. Since our knowledge of God is limited, our languages about him is equally so. We can name God only by taking creatures as our starting point in accordance with our limited human ways of knowing and thinking. All creatures bear a certain resemblance to God, most especially men created in the image and likeness of God. The manifold perfections of creatures, their truth, their goodness, their beauty, all reflect the infinite perfection of God. Consequently, we can name God by taking his creatures' perfections as our starting point. Far from the greatness and beauty of created things comes a corresponding perception of their Creator. All right. All creation. All creation. All creation is how they would look at it. All right. Next, paragraph 42, right? God transcends all creatures. We must therefore continually purify our language of everything in it that is limited, image-bound, or imperfect. If we are not to confuse our image of God, the inexpressible, the incomprehensible, the invisible, the ungraspable, with our human representations, our human words always fall short of the mystery of God. All right? I agree that our language is inadequate to truly express who God is. I do agree with that. Admittedly, and speaking about God like this, our language is using human modes of expression. Nevertheless, it really does attain to God himself, though unable to express him in his infinite simplicity. Likewise, we must recall that between creator and creature, no similitude can be expressed without implying an even greater dissimilitude. And that, concerning God, we cannot grasp what he is, but only what he is not, and how other beings stand in relation to him. All right. Bottom line is, our language is not capable. there's no debate there. All right. Now, we come to this is a very important section in every section of the Catechism. What's this section called? All right. This is going to summarize everything we've covered over the last couple of messages. All right. So let's just go through these quickly and we can be done. All right. Man by nature and vocation, a religious being. Man is by nature and vocation a religious being. Can we all say amen to that? Yes. Coming from God, going towards God, man lives a fully human life only if he freely lives by his bond with God. All right? I agree with that. That if we're truly going to live our life the way it was intended, we got to live it with God, for God, because of God. We've got to be focused on God, or we're not living our life the way it was ultimately designed. Because we're created by him, for him. All right. Man is made to live in communion with God, in whom he finds happiness. When I am completely united to you, there will be no more sorrow or trials. Entirely full of you, my life will be complete. And what Augustine is saying there is not that there won't be difficulties in life, but the difficulties in life won't impact your contentment and your happiness because you find it in God. All right? Does that make sense? All right. Next, when he listens to the message of creation and to the voice of conscience, man can arrive at certainty about the existence of God. This the cause and the end of everything. And this is where we stop and go, wait a minute. Man can't just listen and come to this knowledge. God has to step in and awaken them, give them life. All right, so we would have some problems here, yes. Okay, next paragraph. The church teaches that the one true God, our Creator and Lord, can be known with certainty from his works by his natural light of human reason. We would argue the fact that God exists can be known by creation, and that's it. Right? Not the true God, not some power of human reason. Right? Next, we really can name God starting from the manifold perfections of his creatures, which are likeness of the infinitely perfect God, which are the likenesses of the infinitely perfect God, even if our limited language cannot exhaust the mystery. Without the creator, the creature vanishes. That's a good quote. That's a pretty good quote. I like that quote. Without the creator, the creature vanishes. Man, spend a couple of months with that. This is the reason why believers know that the love of Christ urges them to bring the light of the living God to those who do not know him or who reject him. I think that's a powerful point to end. Without the Creator, the creature vanishes. They seek to have, they don't no longer have a purpose. They can't find any meaning. They can't find any true contentment. They cease to be what they were created to be, which is we were created to be with God. So that's a powerful quote. That's a powerful quote. All right, so what would be our conclusion from this section? From everything that we've read in that section, and make someone remember where we stop. Okay? Very Pelagian view of man. All right? And everybody understands the two views, right? The Pelagian view basically says what? Here's a person. I can walk up and say, hey, believe in God. Look, here's all these proofs. Here's all this proof for this, and here's all this proof for that. And the Pelagian view believes that they can, just by choice, accept it. The other view is, I can come to them, it's my job to present the truth to them, right? But what am I counting on? Not them. I got to count on God to step in and to effectually, remember we have the general call, the effectual call, to effectually call, and that effectual call does what? Regenerates, grants faith and repentance, and brings them to then a saving knowledge of God. God has to do all that work. They cannot do it in and of themselves. Now, I know this can create a World War III within Protestant world, and everyone will start fighting. Make sure we understand the bottom line is, even if you believe the person can or if you believe the person can't, what's the ultimate job of every Christian? To tell and present the truth. everyone has to believe that. Right? Everyone has to believe that. And why do we want to believe the truth? That quote in the Catechism is powerful. We want to bring the truth to everyone because without the Creator, the creature vanishes. It just ceases to be what they're supposed to be. They're created by God and for God, and without God, then they don't... What are they living for? What are they living for? They can live for pleasure, but at some point they'll become bored of the pleasure they get. They'll want more pleasure. And they'll become bored of that. They'll never become content. They'll never be happy because they're seeking everything in this world that ultimately will not do so. So that's a good way to end it. Just make sure you understand. Whether you hold to the Pelagius view, which I think is complete heresy, bottom line is we've got to bring the gospel to everyone. I just think history shows that people are just not obviously have the natural ability. Because if people have the natural ability to believe, then it's my job to somehow try to manipulate and convince them too. And that puts the pressure on me. There's no pressure on me. I present the truth. And I just rely on God. God has to do it. So, yeah, it's just interesting how Pelagius that is. That is a very Pelagius view. Would you agree? Any questions about it?
The companion to the Catechism?
Uh-huh. Yep.
On point 47.
Right.
That the Church teaches that the one true God can be known with certainty from Prince Works.
Uh-huh.
Vatican Council I
Okay.
said that if anyone shall have said that the one true God, our Creator and our Lord, cannot be known with certitude by those things which have been made, by the natural light of human reason, let him be
Anathema. They anathematized. So they anathematized us. Okay. They just anathematized us. Now again, make sure we understand. We do believe that that man has the ability to know there is a God. Right? But that's not getting you to the knowledge of the one true God. Because that natural understanding that there is a God, and because man creating the image of God as a spiritual being, is why every culture has religion, and there's a bazillion false gods in the world, because they know that there's got to be something. But that's far different than what they're saying. They're taking it to a whole, that from that, and because of your natural ability, you can come to know the true God with certainty. No. And we just got anathematized at Vatican I. Okay, that's good to know. We just got, this is what I want to make sure you understand. These differences are not like, well, they're Catholic and they think a little different than us, and they just anathematized us. I mean, not just, but I mean, they did it a long time ago. But that's why I put that book on your desk, because I needed someone to be able to look up the additional information. So thank you for doing that. Yeah, that's, Vatican I says if we say that man, it doesn't have the ability, we're anathema.
But isn't that what Augustine said?
Yeah.
That man does not have the ability within himself?
I mean, that was the whole argument against Pelagius.
And now...
Okay, this is very important. Now, why is this important? Because it demonstrates that, yes, you may have this authoritative structure that you're like is so good, but if the authoritative structure seems to change its very view from its previous view, then that means that earthly structure can change it. And that, now, it's still in some cases a better system than what we have, right? But we got to also demonstrate the possible flaws of that. Does that make sense? Yeah, you've got a great structure, but your structure seems to go against what your structure said earlier. All right? So which structure do I go with? Which structure was right? The one that condemned Pelagius? Or the one that condemned us? And almost condemned Augustine in some ways. Now, we would have to go back and find Augustine's exact quotes, to be fair. Because we have a perception of Augustine that's a Reformed perception. It may not be a Catholic perception of Augustine. So we would have to be fair there. So, but that is a good point, though. It's a good point. All right, we'll stop right there. Lord God, we come before you this evening. These are difficult theological concepts. This is hard work, but I'm glad we're in a church that allows this kind of hard work, because most would not. And I pray that we would, as we go out this week and we meet people, I hope we remember at least that last quote that we looked at this evening, that without you, they vanish. Without you. And I hope we would realize that as we live our life this week, if we don't focus on you, then our purpose in life vanishes, our meaning vanishes. And I hope that we would just be more aware of the Creator, more aware of you when we live our life, and aware of all the people around us who are without a relationship with you. And it would bother us to at least do what we can to pray for them and present the truth to them. We ask this in Jesus' name. God's people said.